Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Sustaining Sustainability. This is going to be our last podcast before a summer break, and then we will come back refreshed again beginning of September. I'm your host, CB Bhattacharya, Professor and Director of the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I'm delighted to say that I'm joined from Pittsburgh by Betty Cruz, President and CEO of the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh. Prior to joining the council, Betty served as the leader of Change Agency, a social enterprise which she founded in 2016, and project director for All, an immigrant inclusion initiative. Betty has extensive experience in community outreach, communications, partnership building, and program management, spanning nearly 20 years. Betty also serves on the Strategic Advisory Council of the Center for Sustainable Business. Betty, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. So great to be here with you, CB.
Nice to have you too. So, Betty, before we dive into big questions, could you begin by telling us about the why behind your own professional journey? How would you define your personal purpose?
Yeah, so my journey has not been a straight line. I first generation born here, first generation college student. It definitely was a winding path. And I think because of those roots, I believe in the power and importance of global connections, that we live in an interconnected world, whether we choose to see it or not is a different story and on each of us. But again, I know this most palpably through my parents' journey as immigrants from Cuba. So you can say it's in my blood. My personal purpose, I guess, would be really, if I were to anchor that in further, and I love this question, it's really about creating spaces and connections where we can see and understand our shared humanity and really anchoring that and again, coming back to those roots in the lived experiences of diverse communities, whether we're talking about immigrants, Black, Indigenous, people of color. That really is what grounds me.
Interesting. So, continuing on the theme of purpose, what is the purpose of the World Affairs Councils today, and how, if at all, is that purpose different for the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh? Maybe you can give us a little bit of context on the World Affairs Council itself and what it does. And how does that purpose guide the work you do and what you decide not to do?
Sure. So the World Affairs Council of Pittsburgh is one among over 90 councils around the country, around the U.S. We exist to promote programs, educational initiatives for diverse and multicultural audiences, and really everyone from young people in classrooms to business leaders and elected officials. And that takes a different shape in each community. For us in Pittsburgh, we're actually celebrating our 90th anniversary this year. So we have a birthday party coming up later this summer to celebrate these 90 years that we've been around, specifically, founded in, similar to the parent organization and the mission across the U.S. of other councils, to really encourage nonpartisan dialogue, to really bring people together to understand the world outside of their immediate zip code and to see that relevance. For us in Pittsburgh, I just stepped into this role January of 2020. A lot has changed in the world over this last year and a half. But one thing that was clear as I came into the role in Pittsburgh and working with our board is that we really wanted to kind of break down the doors in being more accessible, in being more representative of people, different lived experiences, of seeing that palpably in our audience, and also who we're lifting up as subject matter experts on our stage, albeit virtual stages, for this last year and a half. And then really also we've been doing youth engagement, youth programming for over 50 years now as well. And we wanted to go further and really celebrate the importance of youth leadership. So that's some of the aspects of how we approach the work and what we've been pivoting to around access and representation this last year. I'd say the final point that I would make that we're really paying attention to locally is relevance. We have to make these big global issues relevant to the local everyday community member. So why does it matter to a Pittsburgher who lives in Braddock, in the Braddock community? Or why does it matter to them what's happening in Ethiopia right now? What does it matter to them what's happening in Colombia? why does the climate crisis matter to them, and make sure it feels relevant. Otherwise, we're having academic exercises and not actually moving towards the action we want to see.
So, what would be one concrete example of this relevance? Take things that you mentioned just now. Can you just help our listeners understand how you kind of bring that relevance to the forefront?
I'm tempted to go to the program that we partnered on around climate action, and how we've had a series of different talks around climate action since last year. We had Ambassador Mendelsohn talking about the importance of the still to this day relevance of the 2030 goals of the SDGs, and what that looks like in the time of COVID. And then more recently, we had Dr. Jeffrey Sachs provide a keynote and framing around climate innovation that you later expanded on with another fellow panelist, Divya Nawale, and really providing the information, the understanding with experts from different backgrounds, bringing people together on a recurring basis to keep going deeper on those topics, and giving them the tangible takeaways of what they can do now where they are. And we then equip our network, our participants, our community with these resources, with these opportunities to act. I would close that out with saying that the role of our youth programming is also incredibly important on this front, because we know our youth is our future workforce, future leaders in many areas, but they're also leaders right now. So we are working hand in hand with young people, particularly high school students, with directed programming that they're designing, where they're getting to call the shots and learn and do and take action on the topics that they care about.
That's fascinating. And that clearly brings a lot of focus, I think, to social sustainability. And in this regard, the last 15 months have highlighted a variety of stress lines for businesses and society overall, from diversity, equity, and inclusion to gig workers, supply chain challenges, all of those becoming kind of our challenges. Are you guys having any conversations around these themes that kind of ultimately you want the youth to be taking up kind of going forward, that would lead to better lives for all?
Definitely. We launched this year a 5 unique series to go deeper on resiliency, on human rights, on governance and diplomacy, immigration. And through that series, that's where we're really connecting with our community. And we recognize that this work can't happen in isolation. So there's what we're doing as a convener and connector, trying to build a more thriving, competitive, and inclusive Pittsburgh, but we can't do it, and we won't do it in isolation. So some of the issues that we have been spotlighting. So for us, it's how are we shining the light on the leaders, on the folks that are walking the walk, on the innovators. Everyone from, we had an early talk last year with Nisha Blackwell, who is an entrepreneur. She's in Pittsburgh, but has a global business, a global enterprise called Knott's Land, which is a part of the circular economy in terms of how she takes and repurposes textiles into bow ties and other materials. And it's really innovative. She employs immigrants and other folks from different backgrounds as part of her team. So really lifting up those stories. And we're seeing more and more interest and growth and attention to innovators like Nisha within, again, the circular economy and other areas. I would say the movement that we're seeing, conversations that we're seeing deepen around racial justice and increasingly towards anti-racism, which is the real goal, is important. And we're seeing that across corporate partners as well as at the social community level and other. And there's also has been more of an awakening around climate action and the urgency to not only believe in the science, but also to do something about it.
Yeah, in fact, you alluded to the recent event that we collaborated on, which was titled The Impact of Climate Innovation on the Road to Net Zero. I wonder if you could share a couple of highlights, key learnings from that event as far as opportunities for the greater Pittsburgh region.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really struck me, and I don't know why it struck me so much, it was unexpected because we're talking about such an important and serious topic, and it's climate crisis. The urgency, the need to act is upon us, has been upon us. So I wasn't expecting so much optimism. I wasn't expecting the the optimism that you all shared on how we can make different choices that have an impact right now. And that while it seems sometimes can seem insurmountable, there is action, there are steps we can take. There are different views, as we just uncovered in that conversation, of how we get there. But we can get there as long as we're all working towards it and modifying our, yes, there are behavioral components, and there's also industry and structural changes that need to happen, which is the important work you're leading at the center of rallying businesses and organizations to take those steps. So I think that's the point, is a lot of us don't know what to do, where to start, which industry to pay attention to or not. And I'm not giving you maybe the hyper specifics that you're looking for, but that was my starting point, I guess.
Yeah, no, this is great. I mean, that is, in fact, we have optimism is imperative, I think, because if we are not optimistic about being able to get somewhere, we never will. I mean, that's at least my take on the entire thing, and we have to have conviction that we can surmount this existential crisis, and that's what we are trying to do. So thank you for kind of noticing that, and that's, I think, important for our listeners to take note of as well.
I guess another thing I would just point out there is, again, the onus being on, that came away as a clear takeaway from that talk, is that the shared responsibility, the onus being on both industry and individuals to be engaged with climate change. And I think sometimes we're pointing the finger at the other, and this collective opportunity for shared responsibility is upon us.
Yeah, and this is exactly where I say that there is no finger pointing, or there ought not to be any finger pointing. We are all responsible for our planet, and we need to take ownership, which is a concept that, as you know, I proffer in my book, Small
Yes.
Actions, Big Difference. So, one more question, which is kind of on this business of ESG, environmental, social, and governance metrics that are becoming mainstream topics for financiers, regulators, boards. What are you seeing in terms of the youth or other stakeholders? Are they getting interested in the sustainability related metrics, and are they beginning to think about these measurements for assessing the sustainability of an organization, or are they too far away from all of this?
No, 100%. I think that when we're talking about ESG and the networks and the stakeholders that we're looking at, we absolutely, I thank you for calling out youth in particular, because we do need to be looking at young people specifically, because they are not only paying attention, they're forcing accountability. They're making decisions with their pocketbook. To the degree that they have money and the power that is at their hands, they are making those choices. They are looking to corporations to decide, and other employers to decide, is that the type of organization I want to be a part of? So pretty much any employer who is not making the changes now, it's a detriment to their own future workforce and growth, because young people are paying attention and they're making choices accordingly to what they're noticing, to what they're seeing or what they're not seeing. And they will not be fooled by marketing tactics that don't actually have substantive change tied to them. Long before even this past year and everything, the COVID-19 pandemic and the other pandemics, racial injustice awakening, and everything else that we have very much confronted at long last, long before this, the young people in our network were paying attention to the sustainable development goals. We're looking at tangible ways that they could be involved. We're thinking, as far as across systems, what role and steps they can change. And we're taking action within their schools, within their communities. So they are ready. Not only are they ready, they are and have been doing. It's a matter of the rest of us catching up to the young people and making sure we're including them and building the world they not only want to be a part of, demand to be a part of.
Very, very well put. Very well. A fascinating conversation, but sadly, we are coming to the close of our time. So I'm going to ask you for two calls to action. What call to action would you make to our listeners?
I would say that it is very easy to get overwhelmed, not knowing where to start or what to do. it's easy to dismiss the extent of the challenge that is in front of us if we don't feel personally responsible for it, right? If we say, well, that's not our mission, or I didn't do that. It wasn't my family that caused that harm, caused that reality. So whether that challenge is racial injustice or the climate crisis, which are interconnected, by the way. And I hope that folks understand that and explore that if it's not clear. But whatever role you have or have not played, this is bigger than you. This is bigger than me. This is bigger than us as individuals and impacts all of us, our children, our neighbors, our future as a whole. So I would say you have a choice right now to make a different choice. Whatever you're doing, whatever you have been doing or haven't, there are choices that we can make starting right now. And I guess I would come back to that talk that we collaborated on and implore us to look at what is the one thing I can do as an individual, whether that's within my family, within my neighborhood, within my place of worship. What is the one thing I can do? And maybe that one thing is to pick up a book, to learn, to take a step towards greater understanding that leads towards action. And what is the one thing I can do as part of an institution? So many of us are parts of institutions. We all are, whether that institution is our place of work, as business leaders, as nonprofit leaders, or as community members and places that we interact with. We have a voice where we can use the power that is at our hands and demand and ask or demand for the type of action that we want to see and make those recommendations. So I think all of this, again, there is a level of responsibility and choice, and whether you have or have not been engaged before should not stop you from becoming engaged now. Don't be overwhelmed by it. Learn and then act.
Betty Cruz, it was a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for taking time to talk with us today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
And before I sign off, I want to say that this podcast is made possible with the help of my colleagues, Chris Gassman, who is the Associate Director of the Center for Sustainable Business, and Sakshi Midha, who's Center Coordinator at the Center for Sustainable Business. This is your host, CB Bhattacharya, signing off for the summer, and we'll see you back early September.